You are lying down. You don't remember deciding to lie down. The ceiling above you is white, or maybe it's the sky, or maybe it's nothing at all. Somewhere far away, someone is saying your name, and their voice sounds like it's coming through water. Your heart just stopped. And here's the part nobody tells you. Right now, in this exact moment, with no pulse, no breath, and a body that any doctor on earth would call clinically dead, your brain is about to do something so strange, so completely backwards from everything we assumed, that the scientists who first recorded it thought their equipment was broken. It is not shutting down. It is turning up.
For basically all of human history, we've had exactly two options for what happens when you die. Option 1, the religious answer, something leaves. Option 2, the materialist answer, the lights go out, the machine stops, end of file. Both of those answers have one thing in common. Neither of them was ever actually measured. Nobody had ever put electrodes on a dying brain and just watched. Because how would you? You can't schedule a death. You can't ask a dying person to hold still and describe what they're seeing. The single most universal experience in the human species, the one thing that is guaranteed to happen to you personally and to everyone you have ever loved, was, scientifically speaking, a black box. Until 2013, when a researcher in Michigan finally opened it. And what came out of that box is weirder than either answer we'd been arguing about for 3,000 years. Her name is Jimo Borjigian, and she works at the University of Michigan. In 2013, she and her team did something that sounds simple and is actually kind of monstrous. They took laboratory rats, they put electrodes directly into their brains, and then they stopped their hearts, and they just recorded every millisecond. Watching a brain die in real time with the resolution of a scientific instrument instead of the guesswork of a grieving family in a hospital hallway. Everybody knew what was going to happen. It was so obvious it barely counted as a hypothesis. Heart stops, blood stops, oxygen stops, brain goes quiet. You'd see the electrical activity fall off a cliff, a fast, ugly slide down into a flat line. That's it. That's death. That's the picture every single one of us has in our head, and it's the picture we got from 100 years of hospital dramas and exactly 0 years of actual data. That is not what happened. For about 30 seconds after the heart stopped, 30 seconds after, when there is no pulse, no circulation, nothing, the rat brains lit up. Not a flicker, not a twitch. A surge, specifically a surge of gamma oscillations. Now, gamma waves are the fastest electrical rhythms your brain produces, and they're the ones neuroscientists get most excited about because they show up when you are most awake. Intense focus, vivid perception, the moment you suddenly understand a joke. Gamma is the signature of a brain that is running hot. And in these dying rats, the gamma didn't just appear. It became more synchronized, more coherent, more organized across the whole brain than it had been while the animals were alive and awake. Read that again. By every standard measurement neuroscience has for consciousness, the dying brain wasn't less conscious than a normal one. It looked like more. Borjigian's team published it in PNAS, one of the most serious journals in science. And the field basically lost its mind. Because if you take this result at face value, it means the moment of death isn't a fade out, it's a spike. The lights don't dim, they flare. But there's an enormous, obvious problem with all of this, and I'm not going to skip past it because it's the exact problem that makes the rest of this story so good. Rats can't tell you what they saw. So here's the thing. To actually answer the question, what does the last few minutes feel like? You need a human brain, wired up, recording at the exact moment it dies. And you cannot do that experiment. There is no ethics board on this planet that will sign off on it. You'd need someone to be hooked up to a full EEG for an unrelated medical reason, and then die unexpectedly mid-recording while the machine is still running, which is a nearly impossible coincidence. In 2022, it happened. An 87-year-old man was in a hospital being monitored with EEG because he had epilepsy. The doctors were watching his seizures, and then, in the middle of the recording, he had a heart attack and died. They didn't plan it, nobody wanted it, but the machine was on. For the first time in history, there was a continuous, high-resolution recording of a human brain crossing the line. And when the team, including a neurosurgeon named Ajmal Zamar, went back and looked at that data, they found the same thing. A surge of gamma. In the 30 seconds before his heart stopped and the 30 seconds after, the same signature. In a rat in a lab in Michigan, and in an old man in a hospital bed knucklehead who is just trying to get his epilepsy sorted out. Now, and I want to be really honest with you here because this is where a lot of internet science goes completely off the rails. One man is not a study. One patient who had epilepsy, a brain condition that produces abnormal electrical activity as its entire defining feature. No control group, nothing. If you're a careful scientist, this result should make you nervous, not confident. And the authors themselves were extremely careful. They did not claim this man experienced anything. They said, the pattern we recorded is the kind of pattern that, in a healthy brain, shows up during memory retrieval and dreaming. That's it. That's all they'd say. Which is a devastatingly restrained way of describing what might be the most interesting 30 seconds ever recorded. But a coincidence of one is a story. Borgigan wanted a study. So in 2023, her team went back and they did the hardest version of this. 4 comatose patients at the University of Michigan, all of them dying, all of them being taken off ventilators with the consent of their families because there was no path back. And with permission, the team recorded their brains as they went. This is not a pleasant thing to think about. It is also the only way this question ever gets answered. 2 of the 4 showed the surge, a rapid, marked spike of gamma power, not scattered randomly across the brain either, concentrated in a region called the posterior cortical hot zone and around the temporoparietal junction. And you need to understand why that specific location made everyone in the room go quiet. The temporoparietal junction is the part of your brain that builds your sense of where you are. It stitches together the signal from your eyes, your ears, your inner ear, your skin, and it produces the feeling that you are a single person located behind your face looking out. When you stimulate that region artificially with electrodes in surgery, people report leaving their bodies, floating, looking down at themselves from the ceiling. That is the region that caught fire in 2 dying brains. And the other 2 patients? Nothing. No surge. Flat, uneventful, exactly the death we all expected. Borgigan's team could not explain the difference. Maybe it was pre-existing brain damage, maybe medication, maybe something about how they were dying. They didn't know, and to their enormous credit, they said so. But sit with the shape of that result for a second because it's genuinely disturbing. 2 out of 4, which means if this holds up, and that is a big if, on a sample of 4, dying might not be one experience. It might be 2 completely different experiences, and you don't get to pick which one you get. Some people go out like a light, and some people go out like a firework. Okay, but EEG is just squiggles on a screen. Gamma waves are a correlation with consciousness, not a proof of it. A brain can produce the electrical signature of awareness, and there might be nobody home. So we need the other half of the evidence. We need someone who was actually in there. Enter Sam Parnia at NYU and a study called AWARE-2. Between 2017 and 2020, across 25 hospitals in the US and UK, Parnia's team followed 567 people who had cardiac arrest while already in the hospital. As they were being resuscitated, chest compressions, defibrillator, the whole violent business, the team was monitoring their brains, and in some cases playing audio through headphones and showing images on a screen above them, a hidden test. If you come back and you can tell us what was on that screen, then something in you was awake and looking. Out of those 567 people, 53 survived. 28 of them were well enough to sit down and be interviewed, and 11 of them, 39%, reported memories. Perceptions. Experiences from a period when their heart was not beating and their brain, by every clinical standard, should have been producing nothing at all. Now here's the part that gets misreported constantly, so let's be straight. None of the survivors correctly identified the hidden images. The gotcha test, the one that would have blown the doors off physics, came back empty. But that's not the interesting result. The interesting result is what they did describe. And it wasn't a white light in a tunnel and a dead relative waving them home. Parnia's team found something much more specific and much stranger. They described a review, not a highlight reel, not my life flashed before my eyes. Survivors described a lucid, purposeful re-examination of their lives, where the striking thing was that they experienced their actions from the other person's point of view. The moment they were cruel to someone, they felt it from the receiving end. There was a moral quality to it, a sense of evaluation, and, crucially, no sense of time passing. And the EEG backed up that something was happening. Parnia's team recorded near normal brain activity, gamma, delta, theta, alpha, the rhythms of a functioning conscious brain, emerging in patients as long as 35 to 60 minutes into CPR. 35 minutes into CPR, which brings us back to the number in the title and to the thing I actually need to tell you. You've heard the 7 minutes thing. Everyone has. Your brain stays alive for 7 minutes after you die, and in those 7 minutes you dream your entire life. And it's this beautiful
beautiful, poetic idea that gets reposted forever. I have to be honest with you, as stated, it's not real. Nobody measured 7 minutes. There is no study. The number got made up somewhere and then got repeated until it calcified into a fact, which is how most of the things you know about death got into your head. But the reason I put it in the title is that the real answer is worse than the myth. Because the myth assumes there's a clean deadline, 7 minutes and then you're gone, a timer, a door that closes. There isn't one. What all of this research is converging on, Borjigin's rats, the 87-year-old man, the 4 comatose patients, Parnia's 567 cardiac arrests, is that death is not an event, it's a process. And it is a much slower, much messier, much more populated process than we ever wanted to believe. Your heart stops. That's it. That's the moment the death certificate is going to reference. But your brain doesn't get the memo. Your neurons still have fuel in the tank, a few minutes worth of oxygen and glucose sitting in the tissue, and they keep firing. And as the systems that normally keep the brain in check start failing, the inhibition drops away and the whole thing may go into a state of hyper-synchronized, hyper-connected overdrive. There's a real theory for why. Under extreme oxygen deprivation, the brain may be doing something like a catastrophic last-ditch search, flooding the system, cross-referencing everything, hunting through your entire stored memory for anything that resembles this situation and tells it how to survive. Which would mean the life review isn't a farewell. It's a database query. Your brain in the last seconds it has tearing through every experience you have ever had, looking for the one that gets you out of this. And it doesn't find one. It never finds one. That's what dying is. But the search itself, the frantic, total, all-at-once illumination of an entire human life, that might be the last thing you ever experience. And now I need to tell you why this is not just a spooky campfire story, and why the people who do this research get genuinely urgent about it. We have a legal and medical definition of death. It's a line. Cross it and you are a body. Before that line, we save you. After it, we stop. And in a lot of cases, we start removing organs. That line was drawn on the assumption that when the heart stops and the brain flatlines, the person is gone. This research is quietly, methodically taking a hammer to that assumption. If a brain can produce near normal consciousness associated activity 35 minutes into CPR, 35 minutes after the heart stopped, then the line is in the wrong place. Not slightly, catastrophically. Parnia is blunt about what this means. It means some of the people we are giving up on are still, in some sense, in there. It means CPR quality and duration matter far more than we thought. It means that the border between we can still save this person and this person is dead is not a wall. It's a fog. And we have been standing in that fog with a clipboard, confidently drawing a line for about 50 years. So no, this isn't about ghosts. It's not about proving there's an afterlife, and I'd be lying to you if I dressed it up as that. It's about the fact that the most important line in medicine, the one that decides whether a team of people keeps fighting for you or covers you with a sheet, was drawn before anyone had ever actually looked. And now we're looking. And the data is not saying what we expected. So, back to you, on the table, with the white ceiling and the voice coming through water. Here's what the evidence actually supports, stated as carefully as I can state it. Your heart stops. And for a window we cannot yet measure precisely, seconds, minutes, we genuinely do not know the outer edge. Your brain does not go quiet. It may go loud. Louder, more organized, more connected than it has ever been while you were alive. And the parts that light up hardest are the parts that build your sense of self, your memories, and your position in space. Maybe that means something is experienced. Maybe it's a storm in an empty house. 4 patients, 2 of whom lit up, is not enough to know. And anyone who tells you they know is selling you something. But consider what we've established. The brain does not switch off. It surges. The surge happens in the exact regions that generate out-of-body experience and memory. And roughly 40% of the people who have come back from the other side of that line report something, and describe it not as a tunnel of light, but as a total, timeless, moral re-examination of everything they have ever done. Every human who has ever lived went through that. All of them. Your grandparents, everyone in every grave in every cemetery on Earth. Whatever that is, it is the single most common human experience there is, and we have only had actual data on it for about 10 years. We are the first generation in the history of our species to get to look at this. And what we're finding is that the thing we've spent all of history being most afraid of, the great nothing, the switch flipping off, the machine stopping, might not be a nothing at all. It might be the loudest thing that ever happens to you. You just don't get to come back and tell anyone.